Welcome, Thrivers, to this week's episode of Women Thriving in Business podcast. My guest today is Dr. Jerrica Dodd, who is the founder and CEO of JD3 Enterprises and your pharmacy advocate. Welcome to the show, Jerrica.
Thank you, Nikki. It's my pleasure to be here.
I'm excited because it's taken us a while to get together. So I am so happy this is coming to fruition and looking forward to everything we're going to discuss today. So Jerrica, tell us about your businesses and then what got you started on your entrepreneurial journey.
Well, sure. First of all, I am a pharmacist by trade, but if you hear the things that I do now, I'm not your average pharmacist. So most people think of a pharmacist working in the drugstore or maybe even in the hospital. And I have had a career that's been a lot different from that. I spent 17 years in the pharmaceutical industry. And because I learned through my health challenges that I needed to prioritize myself, I ended up as a full-time entrepreneur about 3.5 years ago. And it has definitely been an interesting journey. It's been a journey full of learning and understanding more about how to prioritize myself while I am also building my business. So now I do consulting work. I actually take care of patients one-on-one because most people have never had a personal pharmacist. I coach women pharmacists to build their own brand. And I also am the executive editor of Pharmacist magazine.
Love it. We'll talk about your magazine a little bit later, but for you all who are just getting introduced to Jerrica, she has a wonderful magazine where she highlights other women pharmacists and all the great work that they are doing. So it is a wonderful publication. So I will say, put a plug in, make sure you check it out after you listen to this episode. So Jerrica, you alluded to having some health challenges that kind of push you into entrepreneurship. So can you talk to us about, really what led to you transitioning from being in the pharmaceutical industry to going out on your own?
Well, Nikki, I'll tell you, 2 years before I left the industry, I had brain surgery. And I used to think that that was my story, that I had brain surgery because people's eyes would get big and their mouth would drop open. But that's actually not the story. The story is that I almost didn't have brain surgery because I was so busy taking care of everybody else, including my job responsibilities, which obviously, I needed to do that. However, I was on the back burner. And it took my health getting my attention, obviously in the form of brain surgery, for me to say, you know what, I think it's time for me to start prioritizing myself. Because prior to that, prioritizing me had never been even on my radar, had never been on the list. So after brain surgery, I literally had this kind of mentality like, all right, let's go, dust yourself off, let's get back up and get back in the game. And I started having problems where I was falling asleep driving. And what I realized was that for a moment, I had prioritized myself and my health. However, I'd gone right back to all the habits and patterns that I had prior to brain surgery of putting everyone and their priorities before mine. And it took falling asleep while I was driving and the scare of that to make me stop and say something has to change in my life.
How did that translate into starting your business? So you talked about being a different type of pharmacist, right? And so how did you say, you know what, I need to prioritize myself and I'm going to go start a business? Because for some people that may mean I'm going to retire or I'm going to find something a little less stressful to do. And we all know entrepreneurship
can be stressful. Yes,
best stress you've ever had in your life, right? But it is stressful. So, what kind of encouraged you, helped you? What did you see out in business ownership that you thought you could, take the skills that you already had and actually translate that into a business?
Well, I had already started laying the groundwork for my business, but if you know anything about pharmacists, they're usually pretty analytical people. And so I had hired a consultant and we had mapped out a 3-year plan and it was starting to be all perfectly laid out. But then I just had that little problem of falling asleep while I was driving that made me say, I think I'm going to have to accelerate. I don't have 3 years to wait until all the circumstances are perfect for me to go and be a consultant or go and coach. I didn't even know that I would end up coaching. Nonetheless, I didn't have 3 years. So this wonderful plan that I had paid and come up with of when I was going to make my exit, now all of a sudden I had to pull the emergency lever because I felt that if I kept going, I was either going to kill myself or someone else or both. And I knew that that wasn't an option. So I kind of was back into, okay, I'm thinking about this consulting business. I think I better go ahead and get started. So again, not necessarily my choice for how I went about it, but I literally had to make a decision and I didn't feel that I had a long time. So that's literally how I ended up at the doorstep of entrepreneurship. And as soon as I left, some of the largest responsibilities I had, which was my church, I was on the leadership team at my church. And as I talked about my job in the pharmaceutical industry, as soon as I left those things, my health began to improve and I started not falling asleep while I was driving. And then it was like, okay, I think I can really get the hang of this entrepreneurship journey. And I feel like it really began and I really enjoyed it because I had no clue what I was planning 3 years for once I jumped.
I love that. Your best laid plans went out the window. I think it's good to have a plan, but not be married to the plan, right?
Right.
So
right.
The fact that you had thought through it gave you some idea and kind of a direction. But then at the end of the day, you just needed to make that leap.
Right. And it was amazing that when I made that leap, everything I needed in the moment, I either already had it or I learned how to find it or I knew someone who could help me. And I think that for me, part of the planning was to try to basically have an insurance policy or to insulate myself from some of the ups and downs and failures that you can experience in business. And it's funny that I really do believe God has a sense of humor. And obviously it wasn't funny that I was falling asleep driving, but it's funny how it was like, I guess I better go ahead and jump. And so all these plans that I had been working on, I don't even know that all of them even got put into place because it was like, I have to jump and I have to jump now. So right. I learned how to do a lot of things. As they say, I learned how to build the plane while I was flying it.
Exactly. And I think so much of entrepreneurship is about that resourcefulness. Yes. And if you think about how we operate in day-to-day life, whether it's on your job or in your family life, like you don't know how to do everything that you're supposed to be doing, right? And you find resources, whether
you figure it out.
You figure it out. You do your research, you phone a friend, you ask for advice. Yes. And I think so many of us think like, oh, if I go into business, it's like this feeling like, oh, I'm going to be on this island. And no, you're not on an island at all.
Yeah. And I think some people grapple with, what if I fail? I quickly got over that because you know what? The way I look at it is that I am in a small percentage of people who actually jumped and tried it. So I think in the beginning, I might have had thoughts of, well, what if I fail? But then as I went further along, it was like, well, what if I'm successful? That's the way I started looking at it versus what if I fail?
I love that. Change it around. Again, as you think back to that time where you were transitioning, what were some of the, or even since then, what were some of the challenges that you faced as you've worked to build your business?
I think one of the largest challenges that I faced was when I first started out, I was trying to run my business like the corporate environment that I had run from. So I had people that I was outsourcing for marketing and for PR. And I had all of these things that I had commissioned other people to do or contracted with other people to do. And one, that was not sustainable because, I had not made the first dollar. And so how was I going to have all of these people supporting this operation that I was building? But then two, I had to also learn that I needed to learn how to do those things myself and really start out being a solopreneur and focus on branding myself. No one knew me. No one knew anything about what I was doing. And so I needed to spend time learning all of the quote unquote departments, if you would, so that I could, one, know how to do them if I ever needed to, and then two, also know what to expect if I hired someone in the future. So I would say one of my biggest mistakes was trying to model what I had seen, but that wasn't the appropriate model for me as a small business.
I love that. I think it's interesting that a lot of people have the opposite challenge, right? They want to do it all themselves and it's challenging to turn it over. But I think finding that right balance between
Right.
I'm outsourcing everything and
Right.
I'm just the talent, right? And versus trying to do it all, but finding that healthy balance of figuring out what it is you need others to do for you.
Right. Right.
And then bringing those pieces into the conversation. So, as you think about your time as an entrepreneur, what are some of the, accomplishments that you're most proud of?
Oh, wow. I am most proud of the fact that I have coached women pharmacists. Now, remember, when I set out, I was only setting out to start a consulting practice to consult patients on their health. And women pharmacists kept finding me on LinkedIn. And I surely did not have the presence that I do now, but they somehow kept finding me. And it was amazing that what I had planned to do was not actually all that happened. So yes, I did build my consulting practice, but I started coaching women pharmacists, and that was nowhere on my radar when I left my job. And I think the thing that I'm most proud of in that regard is that I started shaping and having my hands on other people's business. So my impact was further than my own impact that I could have with patients, but my impact was on the lives and the families and the businesses of other women in pharmacy. And I remember when I woke up thinking that, wow, I have my hand on 10 businesses in addition to my own. And that was mind-boggling because I never set out to do that. Something else that I'm very proud of is, as I was coaching the women, I decided that I needed to help them tell their story because I had learned how to tell my story. And that was people were coming to me and finding me because I was telling my story. But I decided that I needed to build a platform for other women in pharmacy to tell their story, whether they were my coaching clients or not. And so that's where the magazine came from. And it just is a testimony to when you are in your genius flow. I went from passion in my heart, idea in my head for the magazine to the actual magazine in my hand in 90 days. And I don't know that I had a prescribed timeline, but we made it happen in 90 days. And now I sit and I'm interviewing with you, and it's over 2 years later. We're headed towards the third year this October. And when I created this magazine to allow women to share their stories, I had no vision of a year anniversary, much less a 2-year anniversary, or to be saying to you today, we're headed towards year 3 and expanding the magazine.
I love it. Congratulations. And I remember you telling me about your 1-year anniversary celebration and how great it was. So congrats, and looking forward to year 3 of your baby.
Yeah. It's hard to believe that I say that my back was against the wall with regard to my health, and that the decisions that I had to make, that I felt pressured to make, were really decisions that were the ones that nudged me to go ahead and make that leap. And when I think of the things that have happened since then, both personally and professionally, I don't know that those things would have happened if I had stayed in my comfort zone.
Mm-hmm. So, Jerrica, point of personal privilege, since I know this about you, can you talk to the listeners about some of those actual physical changes that you made as you've been growing and developing your business, and really how that helped you really change your perspective of yourself as a business owner? And then what else has unfolded as a result of that getting out of the comfort zone?
So I really believe that business is a mirror of life. And so oftentimes I have women come to me to talk about building a business. But what I find in talking with them is that life is a bit out of sorts for them. And it's often, I think, our go-to to want to build something that we have control over, that we can be successful at, especially when pieces of our life are not what we would want them to be, but we don't know what to do about that. So we turn our attention over here and go, I'll focus on this and be successful since I can't fix that over there. And I have had that experience. I remember being in a marriage that was not a good marriage and it needed to end, fortunately and unfortunately. And I remember at that point still being in the pharmaceutical industry and everything was going well, but just this over here wasn't working. Well, once I moved through that part of my journey and got to entrepreneurship, got over the health challenges, I was challenged and asked the question, did I love where I live? And I remember when the question came, I was kind of like, yeah, it's okay. I like it. It's where I'm from. It's where I grew up. But I was not in love with where I lived, not necessarily the house per se, but the city, the area, the culture, the environment, the everything. And it was really time for a change. But again, if I had not been pushed, I think we're hearing a theme here. If I had not been pushed, I probably would still be there. So I was challenged that year in January of 2019 to move. There was no stipulation on where, but just move. So I remember going to bed that night, making a list like I was a kid making a Christmas list. I was so excited. I had been given permission to dream. I made a list of all the cities that I love in the United States that I traveled to for work or what have you. And I was like, wow, I never thought about living in any of these places. So I chose to move to Portland, Oregon. And there were many people who were like, what? Why Portland? Portland, Oregon? I love that city. And that may sound strange, but it's okay. That's one of the cities that I love. And so I moved for 30 days to Portland, Oregon. And I just remember coaching my clients. That's where the idea for the magazine came from, Portland, Oregon, when I was there. And they said to me, you're glowing. We would get on Zoom calls for coaching and they were like, you're just glowing. And so I knew that I had made the right decision just to get out of my environment, change the environment. Came back, spent more time. The pandemic came, of course. And I turned my sights on, okay, I'm gonna be home for a while. And that same challenge was posed to me again. It's time for you to move, but really move this time. And so the most recent move I made was to sell as much as I could in my house, including all of the furniture, and pack up what I wanted to keep and move to ... The first place I moved to was Brentwood, Tennessee, outside of Nashville. I had a wonderful 45 days there. And then I made the trek across the country I was headed to the Phoenix area and landed in Scottsdale, Arizona, which is where I'm speaking to you from today. And it's one of the best decisions that I've made to move. So that's what's been going on personally.
Love it. So thank you for sharing that, Jerrica. I think it's important to understand like how all these parts, right, come in and support you. And while you don't have to pick up and leave your house or leave your city,
you can.
You can. You totally can. All the possibilities are there. So Jerrica, tell us how you actually work with patients as a pharmacy advocate. What does that entail?
Well, most patients or most people have never worked one-on-one with the pharmacist. They may see the pharmacist in passing, possibly if they've been hospitalized, but usually rarely. But they most likely have seen a pharmacist in a drugstore or retail pharmacy setting. And usually that colleague of mine does not have the time to spend really digging into your health, your questions. They're unfortunately tasked with producing that prescription, if you will. And usually they're up against time because they're producing lots of prescriptions and they're also having to give immunizations and give vaccines. And so it's a lot going on. So they generally don't have a lot of time to talk to you about your personal health. So I serve as an advocate because most patients also don't have an advocate. It's amazing how just even with my own parents, when they go to a doctor appointment and they come back and I ask them questions and they're like, I don't know. And I'm like, well, you didn't ask why? You didn't say, when can we talk about this again? How long do I have to be on this medication? Is there any other alternative? Like they literally kind of shrug their shoulders and go, I don't know. And I'm saying, okay, well, what did he say that you said that you have? I don't know. So what I realized is that patients need help. Number one, because our healthcare system is a sick care system. It is not healthcare, if in my opinion. And so patients need to know the questions to ask. I help patients understand how to go to the physician office and have a business meeting about your health. Most people do not sit in the driver's seat of their health. They are on the passenger side and sometimes even in the back seat or in the trunk. And they literally show up and they do whatever it is that they've been instructed to do. They don't know what questions to ask. And if they do know, they're afraid to ask them because the doctor's always right. Or they do things like try to get their lab values. They stop eating fried and salty foods 3 days before so that when they get there, the blood work will look all right. All these things that people do, which really sets up a very disingenuous relationship with your healthcare professional. And so you would be surprised what people will tell their pharmacist. And as an advocate for their health, I, one, help support them prepare for their doctor's visits. But two, you would think that my first conversation would be about medications. It is not, unless there's a glaring problem. It is about lifestyle, food intake, and also about movement. And notice I didn't say diet or exercise, but making small lifestyle changes so that you can eventually be discontinued from your medication and have a lifestyle to support it.
Thank you for sharing that, Jerrica. I think this concept of having a business meeting about your health,
yes,
that is amazing. And just that idea and really, we sit down and have business meetings about every other part of our life, right? So I have never heard that. I think that's an amazing concept.
Well, you need to be the CEO of your health. I have a saying that your health is as long as you are mentally capable and able, your health is not your spouse's responsibility. It's not your adult children's responsibility. And it is not the responsibility of your doctor. Your health is your responsibility. And so if you're seeing a prescriber or a physician or any practitioner that is not meeting your needs, isn't listening to you, then as a consumer of health, you have the choice to change. And many people lose sight of that. If you went to Target and bought something and you were dissatisfied with it, you could either, one, take it back for a refund, two, don't shop at that Target anymore, or not shop at the entire chain, whatever. You have choices. But when it comes to our health, we don't make those choices.
That's a great analogy. I am the world's top unshopper. I call it unshopping. And if you think about that, one, healthcare is one of the most expensive services that we purchase. And I think this shifting the paradigm to say that we have agency, we have the responsibility, we have the power to make different choices. That's amazing. That is an amazing concept.
Most people do not read their insurance policy until they find out something's not covered. Either a service or a medication is not covered. Then we want to pull out the policy and read it. And your insurance is not required to cover everything. And they usually spell out very well. We just don't read it until we bump into the wall of what? They won't pay for it. And then they become the bad guys, which I say it takes your focus off even understanding what your insurance is for, but understanding that your responsibility is your health. Most people don't even know what healthcare costs unless they are paying cash prices, which many people don't have to because they either have government funded or private insurance. However, if you understood what health costs, if you understood the cost of being healthy versus being sick, most people don't understand those things. So that's why, as I feel as a society, we end up plopping down on that table with that crinkly white paper going, okay, what are you going to tell me? Because it's never been our responsibility.
Right. And I will say the industry itself does not lend itself to, I'm going to say, transparency, right? So, you get this thick booklet.
Right.
And if you're generally healthy, you're like, okay, do they cover my preventive care visits? And you don't worry about the details, right? Until there is a situation. I think there's a lot that can be changed and transformed in the industry to make it more understandable, transparent, accessible.
Yes.
Is a part of the process. Well, thank you for sharing that, Jerrica. I think you just blown my mind with this this new way of thinking. And yeah, that's great. So tell the listeners how they can find you if they're interested in working with you or just learning more about you. Where can they find you, and what kinds of offers might you have available at this moment?
So, for anyone who's looking to hang out on social media, I am definitely on social media. And on Facebook, I have a group called Some Kind of Chronic Illness, because believe it or not, 6 out of 10 people in the United States have a chronic illness. And so chronic illnesses are very, very prevalent. And so I have a group on Facebook called Some Kind of Chronic Illness. It's where I hang out and I talk about health. Because like I said, most people are not used to their pharmacist playing a role in providing information and providing a resource to listen to them about their health and make recommendations. I also can be found on other platforms. So I spend a lot of time on LinkedIn. I'm also on Instagram. I have an assessment, if you would, that is complimentary for patients to fill out, to even just have an initial conversation with me. Because many times we don't keep record of what's going on with our health, and then we show up when it becomes a crisis. And so I have an assessment online that you can answer questions about kind of where you are right now. And as I said, I offer the opportunity for patients to just talk to a pharmacist, which is me, to talk to a pharmacist, because I think that you would be surprised at the amount of knowledge you can gain from a 30, 45-minute call.
Great. And what's the website where they can access your assessment?
So the best place to access it is to join that Facebook group, Some Kind of Chronic Illness. And there is a pinned post there that has that link. And if someone wants to reach out to me, through any of the other platforms, I can definitely respond and send them that link as well.
Great. Well, thank you, Jerrica. We'll add the Facebook page as well as your other social media handles to the show notes. So before we get out of here, I have 2 questions I always like to ask my guests. So the first one is, what are 1 or 2 songs that are on your power playlist and why?
Ooh, 1 or 2 songs on my power playlist. I definitely like to have songs that are motivating, because in this entrepreneurial journey, it's not like you always get up every day on fire. There are definitely ups and downs in this journey. So I would say that one of my favorite songs is Mary J. Blige's Just Fine, because there was a time in my life when, even though I love that song and I sang it, it wasn't just fine. And so you've heard me talk about a lot of changes that I've made in these last 3.5 years. And so that is like my song, my go-to, because I didn't know then, but I know now that I needed to be working on making things just fine.
Love it. And what is one book that you feel has helped you thrive in business?
So the book that's helped me thrive, both in business and personally, is Atomic Habits. Most of what we do in our life is a result of some type of habit, be it good, bad, or indifferent. And really taking a step back and looking at your habits, understanding, for me, why these habits formed, and then 2, the possibilities of changing those habits so that I can have the outcomes in life, both business and personally, that I want. Atomic Habits was like an eye-opener for me to really take a look at my habits and make a concerted effort to shift them and to change them.
Right. That is one of my favorite books currently. I've listened to it several times, and I also have the hard copy.
I have both.
So I'm working on my Keystone Habits right now.
Right.
And I think, one of the things the book makes clear is like how much of your life really is automated. And if you can automate the good things, then they're not so onerous, right? Like it doesn't take effort. It's just what you do. It's just who you are, if you can automate those good habits. So
right. And I think I see it in your background.
You probably do.
Up at the top.
Yes, it is.
Uh-huh. I thought I recognized it. Yes, I have both the book and the audiobook. So yes.
Yes. Well, Jerrica, it has been a pleasure talking with you today. I'm so glad that we have finally gotten this together, and I'm just excited to see what happens next.
I can't wait. Thank you so much for having me.
All right, take care.
Take care.